She was powerful, respected, and worth over $80 million. Olivia Turner built her luxury real estate empire from the ground up, no handouts, no shortcuts. People admired her success and envied it. But none of that mattered the moment her brakes failed on a mountain road just outside Denver. Her car plunged into a ravine. Everyone called it a tragic accident. Everyone, except Olivia. Because Olivia didn't die. She woke up in the hospital, bruised, broken, and very much conscious. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. She could only listen. And that's when she heard it, her husband Brian, and her assistant Kendra, standing by her bed, whispering about the accident and the fortune they were about to inherit. They thought she was brain dead. They thought they'd won. What they didn't know was that Olivia was just getting started. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about survival, revenge, and the terrifying moment you realize the person sleeping next to you might be waiting for you to die. Would you have the strength to play dead while planning your comeback? Keep watching, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Olivia Turner wasn't born into wealth. She earned every dollar, every title, every square inch of her success. Raised by a single mom in a one-bedroom apartment outside Sacramento, she spent her childhood watching eviction notices get taped to the front door like clockwork. By 19, she was waitressing full-time and studying business part-time. By 30, she'd flipped her first property. By 37, she was the CEO of a luxury real estate group that operated across 3 states, boasting a net worth north of $80 million. Olivia's name meant something. In the Denver business world, she was a storm in heels, sharp, poised, and absolutely relentless. She was the kind of woman who shook hands with senators and negotiated with billionaires like she was the one doing them a favor. But behind the power suits and penthouse views, Olivia was still just a woman who wanted to be loved. She thought she'd found that in Brian. He came into her life like a breath of fresh air, charming, supportive, 5 years younger but mature in the ways that counted. Or so she thought. He made her laugh when she hadn't in months. Brought her coffee during board meetings. Showed up when others disappeared. Olivia married him after a whirlwind year. Everyone said she was crazy. She told them she was in love. But love, as it turns out, can be a very convincing disguise. It was supposed to be a regular Thursday. Olivia had left the office late after a conference call with investors. She took the scenic route home, winding mountain roads she knew by heart. Her phone buzzed. Brian was calling. "There's something urgent at the Aspen project," he said, panic in his voice. "They need your signature tonight. Can you swing by the site?" Olivia never ignored an emergency, not with millions on the line. She turned the car around, heading toward the project site. It started to rain. Thin sheets of it, slicking the pavement. That's when she felt it, a slight give beneath her foot. She pressed the brake. Nothing. The pedal sank to the floor like it wasn't even attached. Panic surged. She yanked the wheel, trying to swerve, but it was too late. The car careened through a guardrail and tumbled down the embankment, flipping twice before crashing into the rocks below. She remembered the sound, metal screaming against stone, glass shattering like gunfire, and then, silence. When Olivia came to, she wasn't sure if she was alive or dying. Everything hurt. Her chest, her ribs, her legs, all screaming in protest. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the stillness. She couldn't move. Couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. Voices surrounded her, muffled and sterile. The hum of machines. The buzz of fluorescent lights. Beeping monitors that never stopped. And somewhere in the fog, she heard the words coma and no neurological response. They thought she was brain dead. But Olivia could hear everything. And that's when the nightmare truly began. The first person to visit her was Brian. Her husband. The man she'd trusted with her heart, her home, and, as she now realized with dread, her legacy. He entered the room with quiet footsteps and whispered words to the nurse. "Any change?" he asked. No response, the nurse replied gently. "We're monitoring, but there's been no sign of consciousness." The nurse left. And then, the air shifted. Brian's voice changed. Gone was the worried husband. In his place, a man too calm, too rehearsed. And then another voice joined him, younger, flirtier. Olivia's blood ran cold. Kendra. Her personal assistant. The woman she had mentored. The one who said she looked up to Olivia like a sister. The woman who now leaned over Olivia's hospital bed, kissed Brian on the cheek, and whispered, "She's still out?" Olivia wanted to scream. Instead, she listened, motionless, terrified, frozen in place as the people she trusted plotted her death. Brian spoke of inheritance, power of attorney, and removing life support. Kendra giggled like it was all a game. "I still can't believe it worked," she said. "The brakes failed right when we wanted them to. It wasn't an accident. They'd planned it. Cut the brakes. Called her to that road on purpose." Brian wanted her out of the picture. Kendra wanted her place. And the two of them thought they'd won. But Olivia Turner didn't make her fortune by folding under pressure. She didn't claw her way to the top just to let a couple of snakes steal everything she built. No. She was going to play the game. Let them think she was unconscious. Let them brag. Let them sign the fake documents. Let them hang themselves with their own greed. Because the moment she had proof, the moment she had them right where she wanted, Olivia would come back from the dead. And this time, she wasn't just fighting for her life. She was fighting for justice. And she was going to make sure the world heard her story. The hospital room felt like a tomb. Cold, sterile, silent, except for the steady beep of machines keeping time like a countdown clock. Olivia Turner lay motionless beneath crisp white sheets, her body broken, her eyes closed. But her mind? Her mind was wide awake. Hyper-aware. Listening. She couldn't move, not yet. Her limbs refused to obey. Her voice was trapped in her throat. But her senses were on fire. That's when she heard the door open. Footsteps. 2 pairs. The click of high heels and the softer thud of loafers. Then, a voice she knew like her own heartbeat. "Any change today?" Brian. Her husband. Her murderer. A nurse replied, "No, sir. No change. The doctor will be in later with an update." Brian thanked her, his voice tinged with just the right amount of practiced concern. The door closed. And then everything changed. "You sure she's still out?" Kendra's voice was barely a whisper, intimate, conspiratorial. "The EEG says flatline activity. She's not coming back." Brian's tone dropped its fake concern, replaced with something cold. "It's done." Olivia's heart rate spiked. She heard the monitor beep faster and forced herself to breathe slower, smoother, to stay calm. She couldn't give herself away. Not yet. "Unbelievable," Kendra said, laughing under her breath. "We really pulled it off." Pulled it off. Those words sliced through Olivia like glass. Brian chuckled darkly. "Cutting the brake line worked better than I expected. That mechanic was worth every penny. And the timing? Perfect. Everyone thinks it was just a tragic accident on a slick road." "You're a genius," Kendra whispered. "No," Olivia thought. "He's a coward." She wanted to leap out of bed, to scream, to rip the floor from her arm and drag herself out of that room. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not without a plan. Not without proof. So she made a choice. She would pretend. She would play dead. Because if Brian found out she was conscious, he'd find another way to finish the job. Something more permanent. Something she wouldn't survive. And so began the most terrifying performance of her life. For the next several days, Olivia laid perfectly still while her husband and assistant visited daily. Each time, they became bolder, more careless. Laughing about how close the car had come to exploding. Gloating over the forged power of attorney documents. Discussing which of her properties to sell off first. She learned that Brian was already shifting her assets, millions of dollars, into new accounts under his name. That he'd fired half her senior team and hired his own people to restructure the company. That Kendra was sleeping in their bed. Wearing Olivia's jewelry. Driving her car. Olivia burned with rage. But rage wouldn't save her. Strategy would. She began listening for patterns. Brian always came in around 10 a.m. when the day shift nurse had just started. Kendra usually arrived after lunch, smug and entitled. Neither of them seemed to realize the risk of talking so freely in the room of the woman they'd tried to kill. Olivia counted every step, memorized every word. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a performance. And Brian was the star actor. Publicly, he wept beside her bed. Told the staff he was praying for a miracle. Donated to the hospital's charity fund in her name. Privately, he was plotting her funeral. But Olivia wasn't going to die. Not like this. One afternoon, something shifted. She heard Brian's voice in the hallway, louder than usual. He was arguing with someone. "You're not authorized to be here," he snapped. "I worked with Olivia for 5 years. I just want to see her," another voice replied. Marcus. Her operations manager. The one man she trusted with everything related to her business. Her ally. Brian begrudgingly allowed him 10 minutes. Marcus entered the room, and Olivia felt a tear slip down her cheek. She couldn't help it. He sat beside her bed and whispered gently, "Hey, boss. It's Marcus. I know you can't hear me, but I need to say this anyway." He told her about what Brian was doing, liquidating assets, terminating staff, cutting corners. "It doesn't feel right," he said. "The accident, how fast he moved in on everything, something's off. I'm going to dig deeper. I'll find out the truth." Olivia's heart soared. Someone still believed in her. But time was running out. Brian wasn't content to wait forever. One evening, she overheard him speaking to a doctor, someone new, someone unfamiliar. "We need to talk about end-of-life options," he said smoothly. "My wife wouldn't want to be kept alive like this. She was always clear on that." The doctor hesitated. "There's still brain activity, but no signs of consciousness. I just want to honor her wishes." It was happening. Brian was accelerating his plan. If Olivia didn't act soon, they would pull the plug. She needed help. Real help. The next night, a nurse named Danielle entered during the graveyard shift. Olivia had noticed her before, kind eyes, gentle hands. That night, her voice was different. Lower. Secretive. "Mrs. Turner," she whispered. "If you can hear me, blink once." Olivia hesitated. Was it a trap? Then Danielle added, "Dr. Shaw thinks something's wrong." "So do I. I've been watching your heart rate. It spikes when he's in the room. Blink if you understand me." Olivia blinked. Danielle gasped. "Oh my God, you're in there." And just like that, she wasn't alone anymore. From the outside, room 407 still looked like the room of a woman on the edge of death. Olivia Turner lay still, her body weak, her eyes closed, machines beeping steadily beside her. But inside that room, a war was being planned. Danielle didn't waste time. Once Olivia blinked that first yes, the nurse transformed from quiet caregiver into Olivia's secret lifeline. That same night, she closed the door softly and whispered, "Dr. Amir's been suspicious of Brian for days. He's the reason I dared to say anything. If we can convince him, we can buy you time." Olivia blinked again, slowly. The next morning, Dr. Amir Shah came in during his rounds. He was a man of calm intelligence, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed. He greeted the staff like nothing had changed, checked Olivia's vitals as usual, then leaned close under the pretense of adjusting her for. "If you're really in there, Olivia," he murmured, "you'll need to convince me. Show me you're awake." Olivia summoned every ounce of willpower and twitched one finger. It wasn't much. But it was enough. Dr. Shah froze, eyes wide, then slowly nodded. "All right," he whispered. "I believe you." That afternoon, Danielle returned with updates and a plan. "Dr. Shah's going to continue reporting that your condition is unchanged. It's the only way we can keep Brian from accelerating the end-of-life order. But we need evidence, real, undeniable proof." Olivia blinked once for yes, twice for how. Danielle pulled a small voice recorder from her pocket. "We'll hide this under your bed. Brian and Kendra talk freely in here. If we can get them bragging about the brake tampering or forging your signature, it could be enough to take to the police." But that wasn't enough. Olivia needed someone on the outside, someone with access to her business, her documents, her digital trail. Someone who still had his boots on the ground. That someone was Marcus. Through Dr. Shah, Olivia dictated a message. It was short but precise. "I'm alive. I need proof. Trust no one but Danielle. Meet her off-site." Marcus received it via a burner phone Danielle handed off at a downtown cafe. He read the message once, then looked up with eyes full of disbelief and fire. "Tell her I'm in," he said. "Whatever she needs." From that point forward, the operation kicked into motion. Danielle and Dr. Shah kept up the performance in the hospital, masking Olivia's subtle signs of recovery, sneaking in physical therapy late at night to help her regain strength in her limbs. Meanwhile, Marcus was digging deep. He started accessing internal files, legal documents, and email logs. What he found was damning. Brian had been systematically moving assets from Olivia's trust into shell corporations, all registered under fake names linked to Kendra's family. He'd forged Olivia's signature on at least 4 major property transfers and was planning to sell the Beverly Hills estate within the week. Worse, Brian had met with a new doctor behind Dr. Shah's back, one who was far more flexible when it came to ethical boundaries. The plan was clear. Within days, they would get hospital board approval to remove Olivia's life support and declare her legally dead. They were running out of time. But then came the wild card Olivia never expected, Tommy. A scruffy man with a weathered face and haunted eyes, Tommy showed up at the hospital reception 3 times in 1 week, asking if the lady from the car crash had made it. Each time, security turned him away. He wasn't on the visitor list. But Tommy kept coming. Danielle eventually caught wind and arranged to meet him outside. He told her he had been sleeping under the bridge that night. Heard the crash. Climbed down the ravine. Pulled Olivia out with his bare hands just before the car exploded. "Your lady would be dead if I hadn't been there," he said simply. When Danielle asked why he hadn't come forward earlier, Tommy shrugged. Figured they wouldn't believe a homeless guy. But then I saw the husband on the news. Something about him felt off. So I stuck around. Danielle brought this news to Olivia, and Olivia blinked so fast it almost short-circuited the plan. The next night, Tommy came to her room, under the radar. When Olivia opened her eyes and looked directly at him, his whole face changed. "Damn," he muttered, kneeling beside her. "You're tougher than you look." He handed Danielle a plastic bag. Inside were brake line components. I pulled them from the junkyard, he explained. Did some research. A clean cut like that doesn't just happen. Someone did this. He didn't have the words for it, but Olivia knew. This man had just handed her a golden ticket. They now had physical evidence of sabotage, financial evidence of fraud, and eyewitness testimony. But what they still needed was a confession. Words from Brian's mouth that couldn't be explained away. That would come from within the room. Danielle upgraded the recorder to a newer model, high quality, voice-activated, and discreet. She placed it inside a decorative pin on Olivia's bedside lamp, perfectly hidden. Olivia continued to play dead. And Brian? Brian kept talking. Tomorrow, he whispered to Kendra during one of their visits, we push for final sign-off. The new doctor's on board. After that? It's just paperwork. Kendra giggled. You're about to be the richest widower in Colorado. Brian grinned. Correction, we are. They kissed. Olivia barely flinched. The rage, the nausea, the heartbreak, she'd learned to bottle it. For now. Because soon, very soon, she would rise. And when she did, hell was coming with her. The plan was moving forward, piece by piece. But what none of them had counted on, what Olivia herself never could have imagined, was Tommy. The man was a ghost. No ID, no phone number, no address. Just a name scribbled in pencil at the front desk, and a face that stuck in Danielle's mind. He came by again, the nurse whispered one night as she adjusted Olivia's third time this week. Said he pulled you out of the wreck before the paramedics got there. He insists it wasn't an accident. Olivia's eyes fluttered open. That was all Danielle needed. I'm going to meet him, she said, voice firm. If he's who he says he is, he could be the missing link. The next evening, Danielle found Tommy sitting on the steps outside the downtown shelter. Worn jeans. Thick beard. Duffel bag at his feet. He looked up as she approached and said, without hesitation, she's awake, isn't she? Danielle froze. How did you? I can tell, he said simply. She's not the kind of woman who dies easy. Tommy wasn't polished. He wasn't the kind of guy people listen to in courtrooms or on witness stands. But he was honest. And more importantly, he'd seen everything. I heard the crash. Middle of the night. I was under that bridge, where I usually sleep. I climbed down, busted my ribs doing it, but I got to the car before it went up. He paused. She was still breathing. Barely. I dragged her out, laid her on the rocks. Called for help, but cell service was crap. Ambulance came 10 minutes later. And you told them you pulled her out? They didn't care. He laughed bitterly. Guess I didn't look like a hero. Then he reached into his duffel and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside were fragments of rubber tubing, metal clamps, and a mangled piece of brake line. I went to the junkyard a few nights later, he said. They hauled the car there. It didn't sit right with me, what happened. Looked under the frame and saw this. Pulled it out myself. The cut's clean, like it was done with a blade, not wear and tear. Danielle stared at the evidence. This was it. This could finally prove that Olivia's accident wasn't an accident at all. I don't want money, Tommy added quietly. I just want to make sure the guy who did this doesn't get away with it. You're not the only one, Danielle said. Come with me. The next night, when the hospital floor was quiet and the halls nearly empty, Danielle brought Tommy into room 407. Olivia was sitting upright, a pillow behind her back, her body still weak but her mind razor-sharp. She looked at him. He looked at her. Recognition flickered instantly. You're real, Olivia whispered. Her voice cracked from disuse, but her words were crystal clear. Tommy gave a half nod. Didn't think you remembered. I remember someone pulling me out, saying, "Hold on." That was you. He scratched the back of his neck. Wasn't gonna leave you there. Danielle placed the plastic bag on the tray beside Olivia's bed. He got these from the junkyard. The cuts deliberate. No corrosion. No fray. No wear. Just sabotage. Olivia reached out slowly, trembling, and touched the bag. Her hand closed around it like it was a grenade. She looked at Tommy with gratitude in her eyes. You saved my life. Not really, he shrugged. You're the one fighting to keep it. But Tommy had done more than just save her life, he'd brought proof. And he had no idea how valuable he really was. Do you realize what this means? Danielle said. Combined with the forged documents Marcus found and the conversations Brian and Kendra had in this room, this could be enough to open a criminal investigation. And you'll testify? Olivia asked, locking eyes with him. Tommy hesitated. I've had bad run-ins with cops. Judges don't like guys who live in tents. Then we won't go to the cops yet, Olivia said. We go to someone who doesn't answer to Brian. That night, they began strategizing. Tommy would stay out of sight, but ready. Danielle arranged for Marcus to deliver files from the business accounts. Dr. Shaw wrote confidential medical notes to delay the ethics committee vote on Olivia's life support. And Olivia kept building her strength, one breath, one grip, one whispered word at a time. But the moment that sealed everything? It came 2 days later, when Tommy returned, this time, with something else. I went back to the dealership, he said. I was looking around. Dumpster diving, honestly. But then I heard voices, Brian and that assistant of his. They didn't know I was there. Danielle placed the plastic bag on the tray beside Olivia's bed. He got these from the junkyard. The cuts deliberate. No corrosion. No fray. No wear. Just sabotage. Olivia reached out slowly, trembling, and touched the bag. Her hand closed around it like it was a grenade. She looked at Tommy with gratitude in her eyes. You saved my life. Not really, he shrugged. You're the one fighting to keep it. But Tommy had done more than just save her life, he'd brought proof. And he had no idea how valuable he really was. Do you realize what this means? Danielle said. Combined with the forged documents Marcus found and the conversations Brian and Kendra had in this room, this could be enough to open a criminal investigation. And you'll testify? Olivia asked, locking eyes with him. Tommy hesitated. I've had bad run-ins with cops. Judges don't like guys who live in tents. Then we won't go to the cops yet, Olivia said. We go to someone who doesn't answer to Brian. That night, they began strategizing. Tommy would stay out of sight, but ready. Danielle arranged for Marcus to deliver files from the business accounts. Dr. Shaw wrote confidential medical notes to delay the ethics committee vote on Olivia's life support. And Olivia kept building her strength, one breath, one grip, one whispered word at a time. But the moment that sealed everything? It came 2 days later, when Tommy returned, this time, with something else. I went back to the dealership, he said. I was looking around. Dumpster diving, honestly. But then I heard voices, Brian and that assistant of his. They didn't know I was there. He handed Danielle a tiny digital recorder. They were talking about the brakes. How they paid the mechanic. How they thought you'd die fast and clean. They joked about it. Olivia stared at the recorder. Her hands trembled again, but not from weakness. From rage. From power. For the first time since she woke up in that hospital bed, she wasn't just surviving. She was getting ready to strike. Because now, She had everything. Eyewitness, evidence, motive, and a front row seat to her own resurrection. Brian Turner thought he was about to win. With Olivia in a coma, or so he believed, there was no one left to stop him. The hospital board was bending to his grief-stricken husband routine. The fake power of attorney documents were already in play. And with the help of a friendly out-of-town physician, Brian had finally convinced the ethics committee to review end-of-life options. Her brain's not coming back, he told them, tears glistening in his eyes. She always said she didn't want to live like this. She was strong, proud. She'd hate this. They bought every word. Behind closed doors, Brian and Kendra celebrated like they'd won the lottery. Which, in a way, they had. Once Olivia was gone, her $80 million empire would belong to Brian and Kendra by association. But they had one problem left to deal with: Marcus. Why is he still sniffing around? Kendra hissed one afternoon as she lounged on Olivia's designer sofa. Didn't you fire him? I did, Brian replied, pouring himself a whiskey. But he's asking too many questions. Poking around the company files. Challenging signatures. You think he suspects? I know he does, Brian said coldly. Which is why I've arranged for an audit at the Denver branch. Kendra raised an eyebrow. An audit? With a few planted discrepancies. Some creative accounting. When it's over, Marcus will be out and possibly indicted for embezzlement. She laughed. Framing the loyal dog. That's cold. Brian smirked. It's business. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Olivia had heard everything. Again. Every plan. Every lie. Every signature they forged in her name. She knew Brian had transferred 3 commercial properties into a shell company registered in Nevada. That he had moved $12 million from her trust into foreign accounts. That he had secretly filed to dissolve her company's board. And the worst part? They were planning to pull the plug the next morning. The new doctors ready to sign off, Brian whispered to Kendra as they stood by Olivia's bed. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The machines go off. I've already started the estate paperwork. Kendra smiled like it was her birthday. And then we're free. Olivia lay still, her heart pounding, but not from fear. From focus. From readiness. Danielle's recorder, tucked beneath the lamp, captured every vile word. Tommy's evidence was safe in a secure locker. Marcus had compiled financial records, emails, timestamps, and matching forged signatures. They had everything. That night, the team met in secret. Olivia, now able to sit up on her own, laid out the final phase. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Brian and Kendra are meeting the estate lawyer in my hospital room, she said, her voice hoarse but strong. They think I'll be dead by then. Instead, I'll be waiting. Dr. Amir added, Detective Ruiz and her officers will be on the floor, disguised as hospital staff. The moment we get verbal confirmation on tape, we move. Marcus nodded. I'll deliver the documents to the DA's office as soon as the arrest is made. And what about Tommy? Danielle asked. He's ready, Olivia said. His statement, the brake parts, and the audio from the dealership, it's all logged and time-stamped. They looked at each other, this mismatched, unlikely team brought together by betrayal, loyalty, and a shared thirst for justice. Olivia took a breath. They thought they buried me, she said. They just didn't know I was a seed. The next morning, Brian was all smiles. He wore a tailored navy suit and a silver tie, grieving husband chic. He kissed Olivia's forehead like a man saying goodbye, never knowing she was awake behind those still eyelids. He spoke to nurses. Shook hands with administrators. Thanked them for caring for his beloved wife. By noon, everything was in place. At exactly 2 p.m., the hospital room door opened. Brian walked in with Kendra on his arm and a man in a gray suit behind them, the estate lawyer. "As you can see," Brian said, gesturing to Olivia, "she remains unresponsive. We're proceeding with the final transfers." The lawyer opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "These are the transfer documents for Turner Holdings, the Aspen property, and the San Diego condos. We'll need your signature on each." Brian pulled out a Montblanc pen with flair. "Olivia trusted me completely," he said. "She'd want this to be smooth." Kendra circled the bed, glancing at Olivia's face. "She looks so peaceful," she said, not knowing her every word was being recorded. The lawyer hesitated. If, by some miracle, she were to recover, these documents could be challenged. Brian scoffed. "She's not coming back." Kendra leaned in, smug. "Unless zombies are real." That was the moment. Olivia opened her eyes. Slowly. Deliberately. Her gaze sharp. Her voice clear. "Then call me AF *****ing zombie." The room exploded into chaos. The lawyer dropped his pen. Kendra screamed. Brian went white. "Impossible," he choked. This isn't real." "Oh, it's real," Olivia said, sitting up. "And you're going to jail." Detective Ruiz and two plainclothes officers entered the room instantly, badges flashing. "Brian Turner," she said. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy." Kendra made a break for the door. Didn't get far. As officers cuffed Brian, he turned to Olivia, face twisted with rage. "You think this is over? You think anyone will believe you?" Olivia met his glare, calm as steel. "They don't have to believe me," she said. "They just have to listen." She reached toward the lamp and clicked the recorder. Brian's own voice filled the room, clear, cruel, and damning. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Just outside, the hospital carried on with its daily hum, carts rolling, soft intercoms echoing, nurses exchanging updates. But in room 407, time felt like it had frozen. Olivia Turner lay perfectly still in her hospital bed. Eyes closed. Heart calm. Muscles tense beneath the blankets. This was it. The day Brian Turner had waited for. And the day Olivia had planned for. At 1:58 p.m., the door opened. Brian walked in, wearing his usual mask of sorrow. Kendra followed behind him in a pencil skirt and pearls, dressed like she belonged there, like she owned the place. The lawyer trailed them, briefcase in hand, glancing nervously between the two. Brian walked up to Olivia's bed and placed a hand on hers. "Still unresponsive," he said with a sigh. "Such a tragedy." Kendra rolled her eyes behind his back. "Yeah, heartbreaking." The lawyer cleared his throat and set the briefcase on the nearby tray. "Mr. Turner, these are the final estate transfer documents. Once signed, all of Ms. Turner's business holdings and properties will be under your control. We're also finalizing the clause to convert her life insurance policy. Do you still wish to proceed before tomorrow's procedure?" Brian didn't even blink. Absolutely. She was clear in her wishes. Kendra leaned close, inspecting Olivia's face with a smirk. "She looks peaceful. Like she's already gone." "You sure she can't hear us?" she whispered. Brian chuckled. "And if she could, what would she do? Blink at us?" Kendra giggled. "Good point." They both laughed. From beneath her closed lids, Olivia could feel it. The air shifting. The moment building. Her breathing was slow and steady. She'd practiced this. She was ready. The lawyer began flipping pages. Initial here, and here, full signature on this line. Brian signed each document with smooth strokes, confident, arrogant, untouchable. Kendra hovered beside him like a vulture ready to feast. They didn't notice Olivia's fingers tightening slightly under the blanket, or her jaw flexing ever so subtly. Then came the moment Olivia had been waiting for. The lawyer paused. "One last question, Mr. Turner, for legal clarity. If your wife were to miraculously regain consciousness, are you aware that these transfers could be considered void and fraudulent if she contests them?" Brian didn't hesitate. "She won't." The lawyer blinked. "But if she did?" "She won't," he repeated, sharper this time. "She's brain dead. We pull the plug at 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's the timeline. These documents ensure a smooth transition." And that was it. That was the moment Olivia chose to rise. Slowly, steadily, she opened her eyes. Her gaze locked on Brian's face like a laser. "I wouldn't want that at all, Brian," she said, her voice raspy, but ice-cold. Brian froze. The pen slipped from his hand. His head snapped toward her. Olivia didn't flinch. She sat up slightly, pain flashing through her ribs, but she didn't care. The strength in her voice grew with each syllable. "I've been awake the whole time." Kendra gasped, stepping backward like she'd seen a ghost. "No. No. This is a trick." Brian's face drained of color. His mouth opened but no words came out. "You sat by my bed," Olivia continued, "and detailed how you tried to kill me. How you cut my brakes. How you were going to frame Marcus. I heard every word." The lawyer backed away slowly, eyes wide. I wasn't aware she could." "She couldn't," Brian stammered. She's making it up. She's confused. Delirious." But Olivia reached over, picked up the tiny recording device Danielle had hidden in the lamp, and clicked play. The room filled with Brian's own voice. "The brake failure worked better than we expected. Once she's gone, everything she built is ours. Marcus? Don't worry, I've arranged for some creative accounting to take him out too." Silence. Then, the door opened again. Detective Carla Ruiz stepped inside, flanked by two officers in plain clothes. Her badge gleamed under the hospital's fluorescent lights. "Brian Turner," she said, her voice clipped and official, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and embezzlement." Kendra shrieked and tried to run, but one of the officers caught her before she reached the door. Brian's mask of charm shattered. "You bitch," he spat at Olivia. "You were supposed to die." Olivia stared him down, calm and unflinching. "You should have made sure the brakes finished the job." Brian lunged, but the officers tackled him before he got close. As they cuffed him, he twisted around, shouting, "This isn't over. You think this is justice? I'll be out by morning." "Then I guess I'll have to live through another day," Olivia replied, her voice like steel. Kendra screamed as she was dragged out of the room. "I gave you 3 years of my life, Olivia. And you never let me touch your damn earrings." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it's because I earned them." The lawyer stood frozen at the door, briefcase still in his hand. Olivia narrowed her eyes at him. "Don't even think about leaving," she said. "The DA's going to want a word with you, too." The lawyer gulped. As the room emptied, Brian and Kendra in cuffs, the last echoes of their downfall still hanging in the air, Olivia let out a slow breath. Danielle rushed in a moment later, eyes wide, beaming. "You did it." "No," Olivia said, finally sinking back into her pillow. "We did it." And for the first time since the accident, she felt completely, unmistakably alive. As Brian and Kendra were hauled down the hospital corridor in handcuffs, the walls echoed with their protests. "This is a mistake. She's manipulating you. I want a lawyer." Their voices grew fainter with each step, drowned out by the clicking of handcuffs and the quiet authority of Detective Ruiz and her team. Back in room 407, Olivia sat upright, pale but unshaken. Her heart was still racing, but her hands were steady. For the first time since the crash, the weight pressing on her chest wasn't fear, it was relief. Danielle stood by her side, smiling through teary eyes. Dr. Amir stepped in seconds later, holding a medical file and a look of cautious pride. "Well," he said, exhaling slowly, "that was dramatic." Olivia let out a shaky laugh. "You should have seen it from my side." Detective Ruiz returned to the room, this time without her badge on display, just a notepad and a voice recorder. "Ms. Turner, I need your official statement now. But I'll keep it brief. We have more than enough to move forward." She ticked each point off with precision. 1. The audio recordings. Olivia had hours of dialogue between Brian and Kendra, recorded legally while she lay comatose. Incriminating statements about the forged power of attorney, the brake sabotage, and the plan to frame Marcus were all captured in their own words. 2. The physical evidence. Tommy's recovered brake parts, complete with visible tool marks where the line had been cut, not worn or rusted, but deliberately tampered with. Forensics would confirm that the damage couldn't have occurred naturally. 3. The forged signatures and financial records. Marcus had built a meticulous paper trail, matching signatures, document timestamps, sudden transfers to offshore accounts. The DA's office already had a forensic accountant reviewing every page. And finally, 4. Tommy himself. A man who had once lived under a bridge, now the key witness to both the aftermath of the crash and the carelessness of the conspirators. He'd overheard Brian bragging behind the dealership, hidden from view but close enough to hear the truth. Ruiz smiled. "You've built a hell of a case. With the brake components, financials, and your recordings? This isn't just attempted murder, it's a full-blown criminal conspiracy. We're talking 25 years minimum." Olivia nodded slowly, then looked up. "And Marcus?" "He's clear," the detective said firmly. "The planted embezzlement charges will be dismissed immediately. We'll issue a statement by morning." Olivia's eyes closed, just for a moment. She wasn't a woman who cried easily, but Marcus was family. And Brian had nearly destroyed him just to keep the illusion intact. "Thank you," she whispered. As if on cue, the door opened and Marcus entered, cautiously, eyes scanning the room until he locked eyes with Olivia. She smiled. He let out a breath and stepped forward, offering a hand. "I guess you're harder to kill than they thought," he said with a half-smile. Olivia laughed, and this time, it came from her gut. "You have no idea." Tommy came in behind him, wearing a borrowed hospital polo shirt and jeans that were 2 sizes too big. His beard had been trimmed. He looked unsure of his place in the room until Olivia reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. "You didn't just pull me out of that car," she said. "You gave me the chance to fight." Tommy shrugged. "Just glad someone finally listened." Ruiz handed him a signed statement and a check, not a bribe, but an official witness stipend, part of the state's emergency fund for cooperation in felony cases. "We're also pushing to get you transitional housing," she added. "I know Olivia's working on something bigger for folks like you." He blinked, clearly overwhelmed. "Guess I gotta learn to sleep with walls again." As the final statements were recorded and the room cleared, Olivia leaned back against her pillows. The quiet settled around her again, but this time, it wasn't the silence of isolation. It was peace. Justice had been delivered. The woman they'd tried to kill was alive. The empire they tried to steal was back in her hands. And the people who had betrayed her were finally facing the consequences they thought they'd dodged. Outside, a camera crew waited. The local news had caught wind of the coma woman who exposed her husband's plot to kill her. But Olivia wasn't ready to talk to the press just yet. Not until she had fully reclaimed her life. Danielle came to her bedside and gently placed her hand over Olivia's. "You did it." Olivia looked at her and shook her head. "No," she said. "We did." Because in the end, Olivia hadn't just survived. She had outsmarted them, exposed them, and reminded the world that the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who rise in silence and strike with purpose. 3 weeks later, Olivia Turner stood in front of the glass doors of her company's headquarters, Turner Properties, the Colorado sun bouncing off the building's polished stone. A cane supported her left side, but her spine was straight, her chin high. She was home. Inside, the team had no idea she was coming. Olivia had intentionally kept her return quiet. Only Marcus and a few board members knew she was strong enough to walk through those doors on her own. When she entered the lobby, conversations stopped. Phones were dropped. Coffee cups hung frozen in midair. Olivia gave a soft smile. "I figured it was time to check on what's mine." Gasps echoed, and then applause erupted like thunder. From the accounting department to the front desk, people ran out to see her. Hugs. Handshakes. Tears. Some had stayed loyal through the chaos. Others had been forced out by Brian during his hostile takeover attempt. Olivia remembered every name. She walked to the center of the lobby, turned toward the staff, and raised one hand. "I know the last few months have been surreal," she began. "I know you heard rumors. Some of them were true. Some were fiction. But what matters is this: I'm back. And I'm not going anywhere." A new wave of cheers. She continued, "Marcus Chin has been officially reinstated as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately." She looked to him, standing off to the side with tears in his eyes. This company would not exist without him. He never stopped fighting for what was right. Marcus stepped forward and hugged her, real, tight, brother-sister kind of hug. The kind born of trust forged in fire. Later that afternoon, Olivia met privately with the legal team. The DA's office had frozen all accounts Brian had tampered with. Forensic accounting confirmed that nearly 87% of the funds and properties could be recovered. Her estate was intact. Her brand? Stronger than ever. And her legacy? About to grow. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of a modest downtown building, her new project. The Tommy Foundation for Veterans and Survivors. A nonprofit dedicated to transitional housing, job placement, and mental health support for veterans in underserved communities, named not after herself, but after the man who pulled her out of the wreckage. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Olivia stood beside Tommy, who now wore clean jeans, a crisp button-up shirt, and a bewildered look. "I don't know what to say," he mumbled into the mic. "You already said it," Olivia replied, putting a hand on his shoulder. "The night you risked your life to save mine." She turned to the crowd of reporters and supporters. "This foundation is for the forgotten heroes. People like Tommy. Like my father, who served and struggled in silence. We're here to make sure no one slips through the cracks ever again." The crowd cheered. Afterward, Marcus pulled her aside. "You could have taken time off, Olivia. No one would have blamed you." She looked at him, calm and sure. "They tried to take everything I built, Marcus. But instead, they gave me something better, clarity. About who I am. What matters. And who I fight for." Back at the office, the culture shifted overnight. The toxic remnants Brian left behind were gone. Loyalty, honesty, and accountability became cornerstones again. Clients returned. Staff morale soared. Media outlets flooded with coverage about Olivia's survival, not just of the accident, but of the betrayal. And Olivia? She didn't hide. She walked into boardrooms with scars and a cane. She sat for interviews and told the truth. She became a symbol of resilience, not just for women in business, but for anyone who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. The woman who had once been a silent victim in a hospital bed was now leading two organizations, one that built empires in real estate, and another that built second chances for people who had none. Late one evening, Olivia stood alone on the rooftop terrace of her building, city lights sprawling before her. Danielle joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine. To survival? Danielle asked, raising her glass. Olivia shook her head. To purpose, she replied. Survival is just the beginning. They clinked glasses, the city humming softly below.